In the mid-2000s, in the heart of London, a bustling city full of opportunities, a mysterious figure began to draw attention. His name was Robert Freegard, although few knew who he really was. He presented himself as a charming, well-dressed man full of stories. He claimed to have government connections, work in national security, and even carry secrets that no one could imagine. He spoke with authority, used technical terms, and seemed to master topics such as intelligence, diplomacy, and technology. It was easy to believe him. After all, he didn't just speak, he convinced. His first victim was a young woman named Lucy Edwards, a former model who unknowingly was about to enter a nightmare disguised as romance. Robert captivated her with promises of love, protection, and a future together. But behind this facade lay a calculating and cold mind ready to exploit any vulnerability. He told Lucy he was an MI5 agent, the British Intelligence Service. Using this false title, he gained her trust and gradually took control over her life. Lucy quit her job, sold her belongings, and started living under Robert's orders. He isolated her from the outside world and made her believe they were being pursued. For years, he maintained this lie, constantly changing addresses, inventing threats, and demanding total obedience. Lucy lived in a constant state of fear and dependence. But Lucy was not the only one. Soon, other women fell into the same twisted games of manipulation. Each of them had something in common. They sought security, love, or a fresh start. Freegard knew that. He carefully chose his victims, studied their weaknesses, and lured them in with sweet words and false promises. He also deceived a man, David Gwither, making him believe he was part of an international espionage operation. David, confident in Robert's abilities, invested money, time, and energy into fictional projects, all orchestrated by a master of illusion. Meanwhile, the families of the victims became desperate, trying to understand why they had disappeared, cut off contact, and entered an invisible world. The most astonishing thing was that, during all those years, Robert was never arrested. He traveled between cities, changed identities, and always escaped before anyone could suspect too much. But how could someone maintain such a big lie for so long? How did he manage to fool so many intelligent and well-informed people? These are questions we will answer throughout this video. Robert Freegard wasn't just a liar. He was a true psychological manipulator, capable of making his victims believe anything, no matter how absurd. He used refined techniques of mental control, similar to those used by cults or dictators. Slowly, he erased his victims' identities and turned them into puppets. He mixed affection with psychological violence. First, he gained his victims' trust, then made them doubt everything, even their own memories. Lucy Edwards, one of his first victims, ended up living in an apartment rented by Robert, where she was forbidden from going out alone, using her cell phone, or speaking to anyone outside the group. She spent years under his complete control. Everything was controlled. What she ate, when she slept, what she wore. It was as if she had disappeared from the real world. He said they were being watched by foreign agents. Elaborate inventions that made Lucy fear for her life if she tried to escape. He also used emotional blackmail. He told her he would only protect her if she obeyed. Any disobedience was punished with days of silence, threats, or even total isolation. But how could someone maintain this kind of relationship for so long? The answer lies in Freegard's ability to create emotional dependence. He made his victims feel grateful for even the smallest attention. A casual compliment or affectionate gesture was enough to reinforce the abuse cycle. In addition, he created divisions among the victims. He made some believe they were part of a greater plan, while others were treated like prisoners. One of the women, for example, was convinced she was a secret agent on a mission. She traveled with him, forged documents, and helped with the cons without knowing she was being used. This division allowed Robert to maintain overall control. While some believed they were in charge, others suffered in silence, unable to understand what was happening. He never left clear traces. He used fake names, third-party bank accounts, and even invaded abandoned houses to hide the victims for weeks. The families of the victims lived in constant anguish. They wrote visited old addresses, but nothing seemed to work. It looked like these people had been erased. Yet no one imagined that all of this was the work of a single man. After all, who could believe that such a charming and articulate man was, in reality, a monster? Robert Freegard didn't limit himself to inventing a new identity. He created entire parallel universes, where every detail was planned to deceive whoever was nearby. He used forged documents, official business cards, uniforms, and even cars with strange license plates, all to reinforce the image of a powerful and dangerous agent. He claimed to have contacts in London, Brussels, Washington. He used the names of real organizations such as MI5 and NATO to give credibility to his stories. On one occasion, he took one of his victims to a real government building in London, just to show that he knew the guards and could enter without being questioned. It was pure staging. He recorded fake phone conversations with supposed bosses or allied agents. These recordings were used to convince the victims they were in real missions. He also simulated attacks, invasions, and threats to keep the atmosphere of constant tension. All of this made the victims depend entirely on him. One of the women reported being woken up in the middle of the night by Robert, saying they needed to flee because an enemy group had discovered where they were. They left in a hurry, leaving clothes, documents, and even medication behind. Later, she found out that no one was after them. It was yet another one of his many fakes. He demanded that the victims sign fake confidentiality contracts. He said that if they told anyone, they would suffer serious consequences. These contracts were filled with technical terms and looked legal at first glance. Some people, frightened, actually believed they were legally bound. He pretended to make urgent phone calls using coded language, using words like Operation Eclipse, Red Code, and Contact Zero. All of this was part of an elaborate game. Each detail had the goal of maintaining absolute psychological control over the victims. There were moments when he almost got caught. On one occasion, a neighbor suspected one of the houses where he kept some victims isolated. He called the police, but when the officers arrived, Robert presented fake documents and said he was on a secret investigation. The police believed him and left. This was just one of many episodes in which he barely escaped. But despite many chances, he remained free for years, feeding his web of lies. Fear was one of Robert Freegard's most powerful weapons. Not only did he plant it in his victims' minds, but he constantly nurtured it, turning it into a tool of absolute domination. He said foreign governments were after him, that invisible enemies wanted to silence anyone who knew too much. And, of course, the victims were part of this mortal secret. To reinforce this idea, he created artificial danger situations. On one occasion, he simulated a break-in at the house where he was with two women, leaving fake marks on the door and talking on the phone in code. The victims were terrified. One of them cried for hours, thinking they had really been found. Robert calmed them down by saying everything was under control, but now they needed to hide better. He also used direct threats. He said that if any of them tried to run away or told someone, they would go after their family. It was a low blow but effective. Many of these women were mothers. Knowing that their children could be hurt made them remain silent for years, even when they had chances to ask for help. He created elaborate punishment scenarios. If a victim disobeyed, she was locked in a windowless room with little food and forbidden from speaking to the others. These punishment periods could last days or even weeks. It was a way to reaffirm his power and remind the victims who was in charge. Some tried to escape. One of them managed to call the police but hung up before anyone answered, out of fear of the consequences promised by Robert. Another woman, during a moment of distraction by Freegard, wrote a note asking for help and put it inside a trash bag, hoping the neighbor who collected the trash would read it. However, the plan failed. Robert became suspicious, searched everything, and found the note. From that day on, the surveillance over her increased dramatically. Despite this, she didn't give up. She mentally noted dates, places, and conversations, waiting for the right moment to tell everything. She knew that if she was caught, she would pay dearly. He used guilt as a tool of control. He made the victims feel that everything was their fault. The isolation, the fear, even the psychological violence. You forced me to act like this? If you had trusted me, none of this would have happened, were frequent phrases he used to manipulate the victims' minds. Over time, some began to believe these words. They felt responsible for their own emotional imprisonment. And that was exactly Freegard's goal, to eliminate any thought of resistance. Robert Freegard didn't need real accomplices. He created a network of human control, where each victim was used to monitor another. It was as if he were assembling his own army of puppets. He carefully chose who would have more freedom and who would be completely isolated. He said he trusted some people more, making the others feel inferior or betrayed. One of the women was convinced she was his partner in secret missions. She traveled with him, spoke with fake contacts, and even participated in recorded conversations with supposed foreign agents. In reality, she was being used to keep the others under control. Free to go out, do shopping, and even talk to people in the outside world, she served as Robert's eyes and ears within the group. Meanwhile, the other victims looked at her with suspicion, thinking she had been privileged by betraying the rest. This caused jealousy, fights, and division, exactly what Robert wanted. At the same time, this woman also lived under constant pressure. At any moment, she could lose Robert's trust and return to the status of prisoner. It was an unstable and painful position. He kept everyone tense, always on edge. He could praise someone today and threaten them tomorrow. This unpredictability kept everyone alert and fearful. Even among the victims, there were attempts at silent communication. Some exchanged meaningful glances, discreet gestures, or hidden written messages inside notebooks or clothing. When he noticed something unusual, he punished everyone. He stayed silent for days, locked doors, and even suddenly moved to a different city. During one of these sudden moves, he took all the victims to an abandoned house on the outskirts of Manchester. There, the isolation increased and the conditions worsened dramatically. The house had no proper heating, had leaks, and was surrounded by weeds. Still, he said it was a safe refuge, inventing stories about international persecution. For weeks, they lived there, without internet access, without news from the outside world. They began to lose track of time and reality. It was during this period that one of the women, slowly, began to question the truthfulness of Robert's stories. Something in his words no longer matched. After months of living in complete isolation in the abandoned house in Manchester, something began to change inside one of the victims. A faint ray of clarity emerged amid the chaos created by Robert Freegard. It was Lucy Edwards, one of the first women to have been completely dominated by him. For years, she had believed every word he said, but now, slowly, she felt that something was wrong. She noticed that Robert's stories no longer added up. He spoke of threats coming from the same direction for months, used the same empty technical terms, and never presented any real proof. In addition, she observed that he avoided answering specific questions. Every time someone questioned something serious, he turned the game around and made it seem like the doubter was a traitor or weak. In a casual conversation, she asked if she could call her sister just to check how she was doing. Robert refused coldly, saying that would put everyone at risk. The response was immediate and aggressive. That made Lucy even more alert. If he were really protecting everyone, he wouldn't have reacted with such hostility. She then started observing more carefully. She memorized dates, places, fake names Robert used, and even small mistakes he made in his own lies. It was in one of these situations that she caught something strange. He mentioned a supposed meeting with a boss in London, but days later, he said he had been in Bristol during that same period. That didn't make sense. It was impossible to be in both places at once. And that inconsistency finally shattered Lucy's trust. She began studying his movements. When he left, how many hours he took, whether he returned with any real document or receipt. All of this was part of a silent plan beginning to take shape. She knew she couldn't act alone. She needed to find allies among the other victims. But how could she speak without raising suspicion? She chose a younger woman who seemed less influenced by Robert's psychological control. Using discreet messages hidden in notebooks and scratched-out notes, she began planting doubts. Have you ever noticed how he changes the story every week? Or why does he never show real proof? were phrases she dropped carefully, always watching for reactions. At first, the other woman was frightened. She thought it was dangerous to question Robert. But over time, she also began to notice the contradictions and feel fear, not of the imaginary enemies, but of the very man who kept them trapped. This was the beginning of a silent revolt, a spark that, if properly nurtured, could ignite the entire web of lies built by Robert Freegard. But he didn't know that yet, for now. Lucy and the young woman she had won as an ally began to devise a quiet plan. It was risky, but they couldn't keep living in that invisible prison. They agreed on discreet signals to communicate without raising suspicion. A fixed stare for a few seconds meant, "I'm safe." A pen left open on the table indicated, "I need to talk to you." However, Robert was perceptive. He noticed small changes in their behavior. They were calmer, more attentive, and perhaps more united than before. To try to break this possible alliance, he started separating them. He sent one to the farthest bedroom in the house, gave them different tasks, and even pretended to favor other victims. But it was already too late. Trust between them grew each day, and with it, so did Robert's fear. He felt he was losing control, something that hadn't happened in years. Then Lucy decided to take the next step. While Robert went out to buy supplies, she discreetly searched his backpack, looking for anything useful. Inside, she found forged documents, business cards from non-existent companies, and a notebook full of coded notes. Some names appeared frequently. She memorized everything. When Robert returned, she remained calm. But deep inside, she knew she had found real proof that he had been lying from the start. Her young ally suggested they escape on the next trip. If they could get close to a police station or even a store with cameras, they could ask for help. The problem was that he never let them go alone in public. He always stayed by their side, spoke for them, and avoided direct conversations with strangers. Even so, Lucy insisted. They planned a signal. If one of them said, "I'm going to the bathroom," it meant she saw an opportunity. If the other responded with, "Bring water," it meant, "I'll try." However, Robert was becoming increasingly paranoid. He started searching through pockets of clothes, checking cell phones, even though they had no internet access, and watching over those who slept. He even locked doors during the day, something he had never done before. It was clear that he suspected something, and that made the plan even more dangerous. Despite this, Lucy and her partner didn't give up. They knew that if they didn't act soon, they might never find the courage again. Each minute spent, there was a battle against fear. And then, finally, the opportunity came. Robert decided to take a short trip to London, where he claimed he was negotiating protection for all of them. It was the perfect moment, and they only had one chance. Robert decided to take a short trip to London with part of the group, including Lucy and her silent ally. He said he needed to meet an important contact to guarantee everyone's safety. In reality, he wanted to keep the two under constant surveillance. He sensed something was changing, but still didn't know exactly what. When they arrived at the British capital, they stopped at a small hotel near Paddington. It was close to everything, but far enough not to attract attention. Lucy and her partner anxiously awaited the right moment. They knew they had only a few chances. Any mistake could cost dearly, perhaps even their lives. The next morning, he left to supposedly meet his contact. He locked the two of them in the room with clear orders. No one enters, no one leaves. And he warned them that cameras were on. But they had already planned everything. As soon as they heard the hotel door close, they ran to the window and saw him leave in a taxi. The path was clear. With trembling hands, Lucy took the keychain she had mentally copied during the previous weeks. She knew which key opened the door, and it worked. They rushed out, keeping calm despite their racing hearts. They went down the stairs, crossed the reception area without looking sideways, and headed straight for the street. The young woman suggested going to a nearby store where there were cameras and employees. It would be hard to deny anything if there were witnesses. Inside the store, Lucy took a deep breath and asked to use the phone. She told the employee she needed to call the police. He was surprised but obliged. It was at that moment that she broke down. She spoke of months of isolation, fear, lies, and absolute control. The tears came with the words, as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The police arrived quickly. Meanwhile, the young woman remained inside the store, protected. She was taken to a patrol car, where she began telling everything she knew about Robert Freegard. But the danger wasn't over yet. Robert returned earlier than expected and realized the two were gone. He began frantically searching for them, using fake cell phones and even contacting other victims. He tried calling Lucy, pretending to be worried, but she already knew his tricks. She handed the phone to the police, who used the call to track Robert's location. From that moment on, the empire of lies created by Robert Freegard began to collapse. The police had real evidence, concrete testimonies, and a network of victims ready to speak. But the game wasn't over yet. The British police didn't waste time. Based on the call Robert made to Lucy and the initial testimony given at the store, officers began planning to locate and arrest the man who pretended to be a secret agent. Meanwhile, Robert tried to stay calm. He knew he needed to disappear quickly, change identity again, and find a new hiding place. But for the first time in years, he no longer had total control of the situation. The police used the cell phone used by Freegard to track his location. He had returned to the hotel, but didn't find either of the two women. Desperate, he packed his things and left in a hurry. It was already too late. The police had a warrant for his arrest. Officers were sent to various points in the city, with clear orders. Locate and detain Robert Freegard immediately. The final encounter happened at a gas station outside London. He had stopped to buy something to eat when he saw two police cars arriving with lights off. He tried to run, but was surrounded before he could reach the road. The officers tackled him to the ground, handcuffed him, and read his rights, or rather what was left of them. He didn't resist physically, but used his last weapon: speech. He told the officers they were all part of a bigger game, that they were being manipulated by superior forces, and that if they arrested him, no one would be safe. It was the last breath of a man who spent years controlling minds. This time, no one bought the story. He was taken directly to a central police station in London, where he would be interrogated. Meanwhile, Lucy and her young ally were being cared for by a specialized team for victims of psychological abuse. Doctors, therapists, and social workers began unraveling the emotional impact caused by years under absolute control. The other victims were also located. Some were still in isolated locations kept by Robert. When they learned he had been arrested, many cried, not out of sadness, but relief. That was when the investigation gained strength. Testimonies, forged documents, recordings, and even objects found in the houses used by Freegard as hideouts were gathered. Lucy, now stronger, decided to face him face-to-face during a recorded statement. She wanted to look him in the eye and say, "I know who you are, and I'm not afraid anymore." In the interview room, she remained calm. She told everything. From how he tricked her at the beginning to the days she nearly starved inside an abandoned house. Robert, curiously, remained quiet. He didn't try to deny anything. He only smiled a few times, as if still thinking he could convince someone he was a victim of a misunderstanding. But this time it didn't work. British justice had real evidence, real witnesses, and a network of victims breaking their silence. The man who pretended to be a hero was about to face the weight of the law and the truth. The trial of Robert Freegard was one of the most anticipated in Britain in recent years. For the first time, the man who pretended to be a secret agent would face justice and the weight of his own lies. He was charged with multiple crimes: kidnapping, blackmail, psychological manipulation, use of forged documents, and financial fraud involving victims who had invested money into imaginary projects. In court, the victims were heard one by one. Many of them spoke publicly about what they had suffered for the first time. And despite their fear, each testimony was filled with courage and determination. Lucy Edwards was one of the first to testify. With a firm voice, she told how she had been deceived, isolated, and kept under control for years. She said it took time to understand she wasn't crazy, just a victim. Other women also spoke. One of them cried while remembering that, for months, She believed she was helping in important secret missions. Today, she recognized that it had all been pure manipulation. Even David Gwither, the only man among the victims, testified. He said he had invested thousands of pounds in projects that never existed, thinking he was serving a greater purpose. The judge listened carefully to each word. The prosecutor presented overwhelming evidence. Fake recordings, fictitious contracts, photos of abandoned houses where the victims were held captive, and even notebooks full of coded notes found with Freegard. Robert remained silent for much of the process. When asked if he had anything to say in his defense, he replied coldly, "I only wanted to protect these people. That was the last straw for many victims." Those words, spoken so casually, showed how much he still tried to distort reality. But now, no one believed him anymore. In December 2016, the verdict was announced. Robert Freegard was found guilty of all the crimes he was accused of. The sentence was harsh, over 12 years in prison. At that moment, the victims witnessed the definitive fall of the man who had dictated their lives for so long. Some cried, others hugged each other. It was as if a cycle had finally come to a close. But liberation is not instant. Even outside prison, many victims continue seeking therapy, family support, and recovery groups. The trauma left by Freegard will take years to overcome. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Some of the women have already resumed their lives, rebuilt relationships, and even written books or participated in documentaries to warn others about psychological manipulation techniques. Robert Freegard is currently serving his sentence in a maximum security prison in the UK. His name has become synonymous with absolute control and betrayal of trust. A reminder of how someone can use words and appearances to destroy entire lives. This story serves as a warning. Manipulation doesn't always come with physical violence. Sometimes, it wears suits, speaks beautifully, and pretends to be a friend. So always stay alert. Take care of yourself. Protect yourself. And above all, never stop questioning the truth. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Enable the bell to receive notifications for new content. Stories like this need to be known, so we can learn, reflect, and prevent tragedies like this from happening again. And if you have suggestions for other real cases, famous crimes, or unbelievable stories that deserve to be told, leave them in the comments. Who knows? Maybe it will be the next video.